All right, Real John Connor, what's up? Thank you for joining me.
Yes, thank you, Mel. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. Recently over getting sick, and this is a great way to celebrate it. So, Merry Christmas to you. Christ is born.
Yeah, glorify him. Amen. So, I want to talk to you today about the demonic and the demonic nature of schizophrenia and UFOs and aliens, which are, all the rage these days. So,
Really great, really wholesome topics too. So
yeah, super wholesome, but they're really important, and
absolutely.
super relevant, I think. The reason why I started thinking about this stuff is because I read Jerry Marzinsky's book over the weekend. What is it called? Let me get the title real quick. It's An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. And I'll get into the premise of the book, but we're both Orthodox converts, and you work with special needs people. You've done that for years, right?
Yeah,
And
I've
you've
I've been working with for about 5 years now.
Okay, and so you have experience working with schizophrenics?
Yes, yes, I have. I've had. I mean, right now I'm working with one particular client that's his primary diagnosis is schizophrenia. I've worked with several other people that have schizophrenia, and even there have been times where I was also working at um, a drug and rehab facility, and
Mm-hmm.
I worked with people that either were had something like some sort of schizophrenic like symptoms, or they were meth users, and so they
Mm.
essentially started going into what's called meth psychosis, and
Wow,
that
yeah.
very much mirrors a lot of schizophrenia. And typically, when people engage in amphetamine use because you can stay up for 2+ weeks on a long enough binge of amphetamines,
Yeah.
and you will essentially start acting like you're schizophrenic at that point. The symptoms are very much mirror each other, I would say.
Yeah, we're gonna see how. Yeah, totally, dude. So you watched the an interview with Jerry Marzinsky. What did you think about his premise that schizophrenia is actually the voices that people hear are not just hallucinations, and it's not just coming from their mind. It's actually the demonic voices in their head. What do you think
Right,
about
right.
that?
Well, I mean, it's like so it'd be easier if it was the case. It would be honestly more convenient, I think, if that was the case. I think people want to believe that's the case.
Really?
Um, I think so because, because then it's like if it's something that's purely chemical, which is what if it's purely chemical, it can be treated chemically. It doesn't need a spiritual answer at that point. And there's always a path of difficulty with the spiritual answer, with the actual answer that leads to God. There's actual sacrifice that's entailed in that. But
Oh wow, yeah.
even beyond that, though, it's also just as scary if you're coming at it from a materials framework. The whole notion that your thoughts aren't your own is very scary. That's one of the things that he mentioned many times throughout that our thoughts aren't our own. And I've heard that echoed from multiple, and honestly, it's been so long since I looked into it. I can't confirm exactly who said what, but I've heard Father Turbo say stuff like this. I've heard
Mm-hmm.
some people that DPH have had on say stuff like this, that the conception of our mind sort of is almost like a closed circuit unit is not always accurate. I think it's more applicable to think of the mind as almost like a radio receiver.
Yes.
It
Mm-hmm.
picks up things, it picks up messages, it picks up signals from the things around it. And oftentimes what is perceived as our own thoughts, what's perceived as our own emotions, sometimes even, I think, aren't necessarily genuine emotional reactions. Obviously, there's physical, psychosomatic things that take place in the body that could, even if you were to be hooked up to an EKG meter, you could see, like, okay, something is physically coming from you. But that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that its origin point is within you. And
Mm-hmm.
working with people that are schizophrenic, I can tell you definitively that it's like they're hearing voices that they're hearing. They are actually in communication with it, with a subject.
Wow. Yeah.
It's not simply it's not simply something in their mind. It's not like babblings and misfirings of neurons that are, you know, creating some sort of strange narrative. They are in communication with a thing. And I believe
Yeah.
that to the death of me. And I do believe it's demonic 100%,
Yeah.
because yeah, angels don't, it's like, you know, so obviously it's Christmas time, right?
Yeah.
You think back to Zacharias in the temple. You think back to um, when Gabriel came to Mary. If you even go back into the Old Testament, right? Did Michael or Gabriel or any of the other angels, did they ever like I can't think of one time, or in Daniel, right? When Gabriel came to see Daniel, right? Did they like cloak themselves as some sort of like, you know,
Yes.
whatever?
Yeah.
No, they never did that. And
Yeah.
the person, the subject, whether it's the prophet or whoever, or the Panagia, knew who they were. And it was
Mm-hmm.
usually horrifying who they were. That's why the preface is, I mean, well, it's not the reason, but it's part of the reason I would assume why, you know, the first thing that usually comes out of their mouth is like, hey, don't be afraid, dude. Like, I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
like hurt
Yeah.
you. So angels don't have to hide who they are. They just tell you straight up, just like, yeah, I'm an angel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is the work of the demons, and we know that the father of lies is the devil. You know, it says that in the scriptures. It's the, you know, or that's not exactly what the scriptures say, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
So it's very evident to me that a lot of these sort of negative voices, I believe the term is logism. I believe that this is what we're looking at. We're
Yes.
looking
Mm-hmm.
at
Yep.
logism that sort of attack a person, and the purpose of it is almost always, from what I've seen from the people I've worked with, it's to bring the person into despair, to get them to say something
Mm-hmm.
stupid, for people to laugh at them,
Mm-hmm.
to get them to, you know, contemplate suicide or to hurt someone else, or things of that nature. It's just anything basically that just
To fall away from God in general.
100%. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly
Mm-hmm.
right, Mel. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, let me just read this real quick. This was from Father John Romanides. He says, everyone is mentally ill according to the patristic meaning of mental illness. You do not have to be schizophrenic in order to be mentally ill. The definition of mental illness from a patristic point of view is that people are mentally ill when the noetic energy they have inside them is not functioning properly. In other words, being mentally ill means your nous is full of thoughts, not only bad thoughts, but also good thoughts. And I'm sure you've read this, right? I don't know if you can see my screen or anything, but this is Elder Thaddeus. Our
Yes,
thoughts determine our
our thoughts
lives.
determine our lives. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And he, this is an awesome book on just spiritual warfare and how to deal with, thoughts and, how to treat them, how to just watch them and like just ignore them too. And he says that a person who is entrapped in the vicious cycle of chaotic thoughts in the atmosphere of Hades, or has only so much as touched it, feels the torments of hell. Reading all sorts of things, he was talking about the news, our mind becomes distracted, and the atmosphere of Hades has free access to our minds. So that kind of harkens back to what you were saying about us being like radio receivers.
Absolutely.
And also the term logismos, which you mentioned, plural logismi, is a technical term in ascetic literature for a thought combined with an image. According to St. Maximus, a logismos can be simple, dispassionate, or composite, passion charged, like a memory combined with a passion. According to St. Isaac the Syrian, 4 causes generate logismi. Firstly, from the natural will of the flesh. Secondly, from imagination of sensory objects in the world, which a man hears and sees. Thirdly, from mental deep predispositions and aberrations of the soul, which I think that's a huge thing. And fourthly, from the assault of demons who wage war with us in all the passions.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What was that third one again?
The third one is, sorry, let me find it. Where is it? Oh, wait, where's the third one? Good question. I don't even see it. There's
That's
firstly,
all right.
secondly,
That's okay.
and fourthly. Oh, no, thirdly, from mental predispositions and aberrations of the soul.
Right. Right. Absolutely. That
So
makes sense.
in that sense, I think, you know, we all have the capacity to fall into psychosis. And like you said, you can also cause it by just going on meth binges. And yeah,
Exactly.
our capacity is just part of our fallenness. And I want to read about that too. But any thoughts before we jump into this book a little bit?
No, I mean, I just think that I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I think the whole notion about the predisposition of our mind and stuff like that, you know, we'll probably go into this more with when we actually start to touch on the UFO subject, because I think that that's I've noticed that, you know, a lot of the times, right, in the common parlance that we're part of, right, for those who are, you know, online a bit, uh, you come across, like, you know, oh, this theory about UFOs and blah 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 blah. You know, what's the word it's almost always described as something schizo. You know, those
Yeah.
types of theories, those
Uh-huh.
X-file theories, they're always described, and it's not an accident that that's the case, right? It's not an accident that
Interesting.
that's the case. So that's the only thing I want to say, because we'll get to that later. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, it's all so entwined. It's really crazy. And you
Yeah.
touched on so many things already. But yeah, let's parse it out a little bit more. So in his book, he starts out by talking about, you know, the mistake of believing that schizophrenia just has a biological or genetic origin. He talks about the history of treating it and all the diabolical things that they would do to patients. Sorry, I don't want to get into all the crazy things that people used to do to schizophrenic patients, because
It's barbaric what they
it's
used to do, though.
barbaric.
It's
It's
100%. It's
diabolical.
completely barbaric what was done to people that, yeah, yeah. So I don't want
Yeah,
to get into it either, honestly. So
yeah, it's terrible. But it's just like, it's almost like, who is under demonic possession, the doctors or the patients? Because
well,
the
listen,
doctors are doing terrible things.
there's a weird sort of like synchro thing that happens with the doctor patient relationship in these circles. I've noticed it's and Jerry, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but the Jerry guy, the guy we're talking
Marzinsky.
about, Marzinsky, yeah, exactly, yeah, that guy. Uh, he he talked about how, you know, it's like there's an extremely high suicide rate amongst you know, amongst psychiatrists that work with you
Whoa,
know, these people, you know.
interesting.
Yeah, that, well, at least
Wow.
in the interview I saw with him, because I don't know whose channel it was, but in the interview I saw, he went into that about how, like, there's like a 60% chance that the ones that work in like prisons and like long-term care facilities, like with violent ones, there's like a
Mm-hmm.
60 to 80% chance that they get like physically attacked on a regular basis,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and they have those ones in those particular fields, in those particular sort of settings, have like a significantly higher suicide rate than the rest of doctors do.
Wow. That's
So
crazy. And, you know, before this, we were kind of talking about Jerry Marzinsky's underpinnings for understanding the demonic and the angelic. And it's kind of interesting how he seems to be kind of swayed by, I think it's a Gnostic outlook. And we'll talk about that later,
yes,
maybe.
no, he takes a new agey sort of stance to it. I can tell that that's one of the things I picked up from the interview, particularly at the end, because I know exactly what you're talking about. He's like, he took a few audience questions, and yeah, and a lot of people in the space are uh look, at the end of the day, I used to be into new agey kind of stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about stuff. I think you kind of were a little bit into some of that stuff too. So it's like we both have sort of been there before. A lot of us in this space, a lot of the people, you know, who are going to be watching this probably have been through those sorts of things before. Um,
Yeah,
Hopefully, the people that do move past it. You know, I hope so. I hope they don't
yeah,
stay where they're at.
I know. And it just surprises me a little bit because of some of the things he says later, but you'll see. But
Yeah.
okay, so he gets into chemical imbalance theory. What do you make of this? Because he says that this is all just, you know, a claim to sell the pharmacological treatments of, you know, for
Yeah.
psychiatric issues. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I deal with this. I deal with this every day. One of the things that he brought up in the interview is about the fact that no one really knows how some of these drugs work, and I've seen this firsthand. First of all, most antipsychotics, going past the, I'm gonna try to build up a little bit to this initial answer here. So just
no worries.
We're going on a little ride here. But first of all, most of these antipsychotics are extremely toxic in nature.
Yes.
Right. A lot of them, if you can, I think he cited a study that said that the average long-term user will see I think maybe up to a 25% shrinkage in their brain size after 25 plus years of use. In addition to that, also, and this is something that I've had to deal with one of my particular clients. He was on maybe 2 to 3 times the max dose of certain, I don't remember which one it was, of certain, certain antipsychotics. I don't remember which one, but point is that he was on like 4 or 5 times the max dose, maybe. And there was a real risk that we thought he might have been developing Parkinson's, because essentially he would try to get up and he would start shaking, and then he would just slowly fall down to the floor, and he would be physically unable to move himself. Essentially, he kind of talked, but he would be essentially just dead fish on the floor. There was one time where I saw him do that on the stairs, and he fell down and hit his head against the wall, and I thought he was gonna I thought he broke his neck. Actually, it was the scariest moment I've ever seen in my job. And so the point is that and then eventually he, we got him off those meds, and the point is that the meds never actually did anything. He was hearing voices the whole time. So what was the point of those meds? The point of those meds is just to suppress the person. So a lot of these things, these stated uses, are just sort of justifications. It's really for practical purposes it's really for practical purposes. These things are just there to shut people up. It's the same thing with Xanax. It's the same thing with Prozac. It's the same thing with lithium. Does have some use to it. Lithium does actually have some, mood stabilizing properties, it seems. But a lot of these other things, they just really are just there to shut people up. They serve no purpose. And I'm saying this really as just someone who sees this every day. I see it as just, I see it every single day I go into work. Every time I go in to see one of my clients, I see, just really just someone who's almost like being smothered with a wet blanket almost, rather than trying to be helped. The whole notion of the chemical balances thing is so what chemical is being imbalanced, I guess, is the thing. The hypothesis is based off of what is perceived to be the certain readings in lab rats and other blood samples that they might have taken in experimental phases of some of these drugs, right? So whenever the initial testing was done for Prozac, they took blood samples to measure serotonin levels, and they saw higher levels in this. They say, okay, this must affect the serotonin system. But my clients, I think only one of them has ever had a blood test done to see what their brain chemical levels were. It's never done, though. And anybody else, I ask you, if you've taken these things, or people that have, what were your blood levels before it was done? So if we don't even understand what the baseline of the person is leading up to the taking of the drugs, then why are they being given out in the first place if it's purely a chemical imbalance? I think it's really it's a narrative. I don't see it as a legitimate theory. Personally, I see it as a narrative that's a justification for the high usage of the drugs, because they are in extremely widely distributed throughout the country, throughout the West in general. And that's what it seems to be to me. So
and he kind of well, before we continue, I actually have two best friends growing up who are schizophrenic.
Really?
And one of them, my good friend, she was on all kinds of meds, and she had all kinds of bad side effects, and she was just spiraling, And there's a documentary that I watched. I could not find the title, but maybe you're familiar with it. It's about this mother and her sister were taking care of their son. Um, and these ladies were actually put on trial, I believe. I don't know what the outcome was, but they ended up killing him because they loved him so much and they were doing everything they could to take care of him. He was psychotic. And I don't remember the amount of, medications the doctors gave him, but there must have been like 27. That number is just in my mind. 27 different antipsychotic medications that this kid was on. And he had like all kinds of, it was like tearing his stomach apart.
Yeah.
He had like ulcers like crazy, and that was causing a lot of pain, which was causing him to like freak out. And he was like 15, and he was like a really big boy,
Yeah.
And this poor mother and her sister, they just couldn't handle it. And they ended up, sadly, and I'm not condoning this or anything, but I understand the desperation of how it gets so bad. And it shouldn't get that bad. It shouldn't get to the point where this kid is on like 27 different things, like how can a doctor possibly manage that or have any sense of what's going on? It's insane.
And that's it, yeah, that's a great question, because honestly, I don't know myself. I don't know myself when those drugs are given out. How can you tell the difference? And there was honestly I'm not going to go into too much detail, just for HIPAA reasons, but like for a client of mine, it's like there was a whole back and forth concerning this very issue. The doctor, I think, made the right choice and sort of switched him out of a couple things. But our argument was exactly that. It's like, he's on so much. How can you even tell if any of this stuff is working anymore? So what's the need for him to be on this stuff anymore? Why continue on? Because and honestly, the number 27, you mentioned that. Like, I know for you guys watching this, right? Whoever's going to watch this, that might sound like a lot, but I heard that number 27. I was like, yeah, that's a fair estimate, because I honestly, you lose count after 10.
Wow. Yeah.
You lose count after 10. And so I probably have people that are on 30, maybe not that much, but like, but this is the thing, that whether it's 10, whether it's 30, whether it's 20, there's one or two that are like high impact drugs. And a lot of those outside of that, it's like, there's maybe, because the other thing too is like, if they're being given meds for those things, they'll probably be given meds for other things too. So they will, it's almost like to sort of like to not necessarily mask the symptoms, but to deal with the symptoms that come from the drugs themselves,
Yeah.
And so, if you take one of these antipsychotics and it messes with your stomach, you'll end up being on, GERD medication.
Oh yeah.
And then that could end up giving you, bad headaches, and then you'll be on Tylenol.
Yeah. Oh,
and then it'll make your stomach worse, and then you're on another stomach pill.
Yeah.
And then it starts messing with your blood pressure, and then you'll be put on Clonidine. And then you'll have to be put on hydroxyzine to go counter that. And then then it just keeps piling on. And so that's how you end up with 27 of those things,
That's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane.
But it's a universal, Mel. That's the thing about it. It's pretty much ubiquitous amongst the people I've worked with like that,
Yeah. Wow. That's really crazy. He makes a good point here. He says the Greek word psyche means the soul, mind, spirit, or invisible animating entity which occupies the physical body. The disciplines of psychology and psychiatry have adopted the word in name only. After the completion of 4 years of undergraduate study in psychology and another 4 years of graduate work in psychology and counseling, not once was the soul or spirit ever mentioned. These educational programs were spiritually dry, and obviously so is the way that the doctors handle these issues. Although the thought content of schizophrenics is at the far end of the normal curve, they are still a part of the human condition, as we were talking about, and not as different from the rest of us as it might seem. In the course of our daily lives, we've all experienced psychotic symptomology. For example, a wretched or shameful thought suddenly barges into our mind. Happens all the time. It comes out of nowhere and makes us shudder. Startled, we wonder how we could even think of such a thought and silently feel embarrassment, shame, and guilt. Although such thoughts are not something the vast majority of us experience frequently or would act upon or even entertain, we assume that these thoughts belong to us. We don't wonder where such a thought might have come from or why it appeared. Examples are common. A nurse was driving her car when suddenly the thought to turn into oncoming traffic popped into her mind. An individual on the third floor of a parking garage was staring over the railing when the thought to jump appeared. A preacher standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon suddenly has a thought to jump. And I've had this all the time. Like if I'm in a meeting with people, like a cordial like gathering, the thought will just come into my mind to just like jump on the table and do something crazy, you
Oh yeah.
know?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Or to say something that's like really like
Yeah.
embarrassing,
Yeah.
or like that's happened to me a lot, where it's just like I'll be talking to someone, like especially like my boss, and the thought will come in my head just like, well, what if you said this? What if you say that? And it's like something that's it's like more something that would result in me getting fired, basically, or something that's like, you know, they would be like, what was that you just said, you know, or like something that would like probably ruin my reputation, maybe, or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah.
And so just imagine that happening to you like constantly and like all kinds of different voices at once and like screaming at you practically. I
Oh yeah,
mean,
I'd be on 27 medications probably.
oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
Damn. So he says schizophrenics have been telling us for centuries that these discarnate voices are controlling their thought stream, plotting against them, triggering their violent, abnormal behavior. And he's saying that a lot of these patients are actually, you know, saying that like these are not my thoughts. So yeah, he started operating with that notion, and with his, you know, client or patient base, whatever you call them, you know, either they would be ready to relay what the voices were telling him so he could understand the voices, or, you know, the people would be under the belief that, you know, they were just hallucinations. So it would take some time to get their trust to actually relay the voices.
Yeah.
But yeah, he started getting people, you know.
Yeah, the really higher functioning ones will not tell you what the voices say unless it's like
Yes.
obvious, like I was told to kill myself, I was told to hurt this person, that sort of thing. But the other things, like unless you really have to develop trust with the person for them to actually start to tell you what the voices are saying, you know. I've been fortunate enough to work with people where it's like they are not high functioning, so they'll just tell me what the voices are saying to them. But like,
Oh, wow.
yeah, because my one guy, it's like he's, in addition to schizophrenia, he has like, intellectual disability and other stuff, and so he just tells me what he hears, you know, but it's follows the same pattern though. You
Follows the
know,
same pattern, right?
exactly, follows the exact same pattern. The person, I mean, the person has a name. He knows what the name of the person is. That
Wow.
it's called Damien. Whatever the demon that
What?
talks to him is called Damien. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my
So it's
goodness.
actually Damien Pelosi is the name of the person. So which is like a funny,
What?
yeah, it's
Oh
a
my gosh.
and it's kind of a
That's
funny name
crazy.
actually. So, but
Yeah.
yeah,
So here's some, I guess he started noticing some patterns, okay? So the voices told one patient that if they were discovered to be independent of the patient, their overlord would punish them, suggesting a hierarchy, among the voices. And that's like so true to the Orthodox, you know, understanding of, you know, how the demons are organized, you know.
exactly, because
Like that was very
they
interesting.
also follow a hierarchy because they have a particular boss down there. You know what I mean? So that's giving
Yeah,
them orders. So
exactly. And so Jerry Marzinsky, he has this like a mentor, another psychiatrist who independently kind of came to these conclusions himself as well. His name is Dr. Wilson Van Dusen, and the way that he writes the book, he kind of like, it's weird how he writes the book. He kind of interjects the voices of other people. It's a kind of like a schizophrenic book actually. But
yeah,
he's got Dr. Wilson Van Dusen. He's got Emmanuel Swedenborg, who we can talk about if we want.
maybe.
And maybe, yeah. And Sherry, who was like a friend of his, she was schizophrenic, but she was able to deal with it. So anyway, so Dr. Wilson Van Dusen here, he says, the most fundamental aspect of the voices is that they attempt to destroy. They can cause anxiety or pain. They speak in man's own native tongue. They seek to destroy conscience and seem to be against every higher value. For instance, they interfere with reading or religious practices. They suggest acts against the patient's conscience. And if refused, threaten, make them seem plausible, or do anything to overcome the patient's resistance. These are all characteristic of possession by evil spirits, which takes place when the spirits are no longer unconscious, but have some awareness of themselves as separate entities and act into consciousness. Now, I don't know about that, but it is not clear how the awareness barrier between spirits and man is broken. And actually, we're going to talk about that with Father Seraphim Rose. Did you have a thought?
Well, no, yeah, it sounds like based off what you said, I think we're probably on the same page about that. But I'm assuming they said that probably because they take like a pantheistic sort of view of what these entities are. They probably don't. They're probably just like the negative, positive, Gnostic energy type,
exactly.
assumption.
Yep. Because Dr. Wilson Van Dusen, he really admires Emanuel Swedenborg.
Yeah.
And I didn't even really want to get into his stuff. I know he wrote a book called Heaven and Hell. And I know like Ralph Waldo Emerson, the transcendentalist guy.
Yeah.
He totally admired Swedenborg, thought that he was like a man, like just on another level,
Yeah. Carl Jung was very into Swedenborg also. And when I used to read Jung, I remember he would mention Swedenborg often.
Wow.
And a lot of like when the Library of Congress, when they put the Red Book by Jung out on display, they had like this whole massive lecture series. It was like 2 days long about Jung's work. And they had a guy who gave a talk for like 3 hours just about Emanuel Swedenborg.
Wow,
maybe not 3 hours long, but it was like a long, long time. It was like a huge deal. And it was about Emanuel Swedenborg's connection to Carl Jung and like that being a huge influence on his ideas. And so if anybody, I don't know, did you ever read Jung by chance?
A little bit.
All righty. That's a whole discussion for another day, actually. That's because that's going to be we'll be here all day if we talk about that. So if I start going on that, so.
Yeah. But yeah, actually I was, when I was kind of doing research about this whole thing, I was very surprised to find that Father Seraphim Rose in The Soul After Death, he has a whole section on Emanuel Swedenborg. So.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he does.
Interesting. I haven't read that. Yeah, obviously dang it. I guess I should have read that one by now. So.
Oh, that one's awesome. And, obviously that one is about life after death and the demonic visitation that happens at the hour of death. It's very, very interesting. And I'm going to read a little bit of it today, just talking about, the demonic. But yeah, okay, let's try to continue.
Yes.
Some of my patients also reported that their voices came on suddenly, such as the individual who told of a strong wind that came out of nowhere and slammed the side of her house. She said the curtains blew straight back and the wind blasted into the room and surrounded me. It was frightening, like standing in the middle of a tornado. I felt something very evil surround me then. It touched me. That's when the voices started. And that's interesting to me because my friend, I kind of watched how he, went crazy or whatever. Yeah. And I remember him telling me that he was getting, his neighbors were shooting his heart with a ray gun. And that's when the voices started.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Did he describe what the pain feeling was? Was it like a shooting pain or like a throbbing or like
a shooting pain, like a heart attack kind of thing?
Yeah. Like a stabbing almost?
Yeah, sure.
Something like that? Okay. Yeah. That's interesting.
Does that sound like familiar to you or?
Yeah, not from my clients, from my own personal experience. Like from like actual demonic things that have happened to me, like, yeah, that's like the demons do stuff like that. I've seen it with my own firsthand, it's like I've talked about it with my spiritual father after the fact. And he was like, yeah, it was a demonic, the demons attacked you basically,
Wow.
And they also, I mean, it's like, and the whole thing about like your house getting like slammed into, that the demons do that also. It's my
Yes.
buddy.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Sorry.
No, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
No, I was just gonna say no, because that happened to, just a quick caveat, because my one of my best friends who used to be my roommate around the time I started my conversion, he ended up converting himself, and then he, got married in the church, and we were at his new place the night before his wedding, and all of a sudden, it sounded like someone came up and just squarely just punched his door. And we looked out there, and there was no one there.
Oh, that's
So,
crazy.
and after the fact, we didn't do anything, but I knew right then and there, I was like, that's a demon. I just knew it. I just knew it, because it's other thing. I mean, that exact instance happened multiple times. But they do that to scare people. It happens. It happens to people, especially when they know who they are. They do that to scare you. So,
Wow, that's crazy.
yeah.
And they are the spirits of the air, which we're going to talk about, and that's going to tie into some
Oh,
of the
yeah.
other stuff,
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so he also says, for many others, the appearance of their voices was gradual and less dramatic. One patient related that shortly after he began hearing a voice, thoughts that sounded like his own were telling him to do things that made no sense. And this is going to relate to something later on too, the absurdity. I think Father Seraphim Rose talks about that. It has like this hypnotic effect. Mm-hmm. When this voice first appeared, it had acted like someone who had just bought a new car and was taking it for a test drive to see what it could do. It began by telling me to do things I had no interest in doing, such as pick up that pencil or sit in that chair when I didn't need a pencil and didn't want to sit down. So it's just kind of the nature, a glimpse into the nature of what people are dealing with these voices.
Right.
They seem to survive off of negative human emotion. So Van Dusen says, the vocabulary and range of ideas of the lower order is limited, and they have a persistent will to destroy. They invade every nook and cranny of privacy, work on every weakness and credibility, claim awesome powers, lie, make promises, and then undermine the patient's will. I think that's a very important point. The lower order voices have a range of responses that are predictable. Their behavior appears to be robotic in nature. Virtually everything they tell the patient about themselves or others is a lie, designed to emotionally inflame them. A few ideas can be repeated endlessly. One voice just said, hey, for months, while the patient tried to figure out what hey, or hey, H-A-Y, meant. Mm-hmm. And this reminds me of the screw tape letters, because you kind of see like a demon that is like very immature or something, right?
Yes.
And has to be taught.
and the people can take on sometimes qualities of that. It's like, the thing about the robot voice is interesting, because the other thing that it will do is like the person will try to repeat back what they hear sometimes. And oftentimes it's also almost in the voice of like an infant, and it's like the person can sometimes like start to say things that they were hearing repeat, and they'll try to repeat it. Mm-hmm. And then when it comes out of their mouth, it's almost as if like someone's trying to scrunch their mouth together. There's and the words are like mushed together. And to them, it probably makes sense. I think maybe it's because they've heard it so much. I don't know. Maybe it's just also a demonic thing that it's keeping them from actually saying what they're hearing. But I've seen that a lot also.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's honestly, I can only imagine it's probably extremely frustrating for that person if that's the case, when you try to say what you're hearing and all that comes out is just jibber jabber.
Yeah.
But
I want to go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, but I think that's spot on about how it's feeding off negative emotion. I know that the soul after death probably goes into this, and other things that Father Seraphim would say go into this, but the demons hate God, and they're proud, and the best way to get back at God is to hurt the thing that he loves. They can't hurt God, but they can hurt the thing that he loves, which is us.
Yes. Yeah. I actually In Eternal Mysteries from Beyond the Grave, which is an awesome book, there's a really fire chapter on the fallen angels, and not only, how they got that way, but also why they mess with us so much. So hopefully I can get to that later. So we'll see. So let's see. Oh, I want to know what you think of this. One brash inmate comes to mind who also laughed at and mocked his voices when they attacked him. He clearly had figured out that the negative thoughts inserted in his mind did not belong to him. He was the only patient I'd ever seen mock and laugh at his voices. In an attempt to make him stop mocking them, his voices became more agitated. However, they soon began losing ground and weakened. This patient was one of the most stable psychotic patients I'd ever seen.
Yep. Well, and isn't that what St. Paisios said to do?
I don't know.
Well, no, it is. Yeah, he said that there was a story where he was because he was on Mount Sinai. He was because there's a monastery on Mount Sinai. He was there for a while. It's still in Greek control. Excuse me. He was there for a while, and some demon was messing with him and trying to get him to basically, and the conversation was exactly the way he describes. It's like the demon told him to do all these things. And what the demon was telling him to do is exactly what these people are describing, right? It's like, jump off the cliff, do this. Why don't you do this? Blah, blah, blah. All that sort of stuff. And so it's a certain point, he just laughed at the demon's face. He's like, who are you? It's like, yeah, I get it. You're a demon. You can squash me, but you're going to burn in the embers, buddy. And there's nothing you can actually make me do. It's, God is the one that's ultimately in control here. And he laughed at him again, and then the demon just left. And he used to tell people, from my understanding, and I think Elder Ephraim did the same thing, laugh in their face. They're going to get pissed off, but it's like, it gives you strength in some sense, because that's the thing that demoralizes them the most, is to be mocked, because that's a person that's filled with pride. That's the way to hurt them the most, is to mock them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mockery is the thing that cuts the pride the deepest.
That's interesting.
Or one of the things, I guess. Maybe not the thing, but one of the things. So, yeah. So it fits. It's a very it's orthodox. Without, I don't think the guy realized it, but that is that is what the modern saints say to do. Some of them, at least.
Yeah, let's continue, because it does surprise me that this guy Jerry Marzinsky doesn't just go all the way and become a Christian. Okay, so
he's close. And honestly, that's the thing, is that he's close. Honestly, after I saw that interview, I really want to reach out to the guy. He's also like this perfect. He also is like a certified trainer for this other program. I want to learn more about this, like energy program or something like that. I'm interested in, but I want to reach out to him. Just like, listen, you're really close, dude. Like, but there's a few things I want to share information with him about, like the saints and St. Paisios and whatever, because he's close. Like, he doesn't even realize how close he is, I don't think.
He's so close. And if he had, access to some of the stuff that I'm going to read later, he would, things might click for him. I don't know. So let's see. On another occasion, a woman who had suffered years of extreme physical and emotional abuse was much relieved to learn that this human predator's demise. Okay, so someone who was abusing her. And while at his funeral, she heard a voice in her head which identified itself as her deceased abuser. The voice provided disturbing information known only to herself and the deceased. When I explained that it was not her abuser's ghost, but an imposter who had accessed her memory, because demons can do that, the voice railed against me, telling her I was the imposter and that I was lying to make her feel better. This was the second case I'd heard with exactly the same scenario.
Huh.
So, and then the majority of schizophrenic. Oh yeah, this is what I wanted to say. All of my friends who were schizophrenic did not have a strong religious background, if any.
Yeah.
And he says this too. The majority of schizophrenics had poor, if any, significant religious or spiritual background. Many said they didn't believe in God and they didn't like churches. Several complained that when they attempted to enter a church or read the Bible, their voices got louder and vehemently protested to a point where they couldn't concentrate. Some reported that they got headaches. Others said their voices became unbearably loud and they had to run out of the church. The Bible was not the only reading material that triggered a volatile reaction from the voices. Virtually any positive spiritual or self-help book did the same, although to a lesser degree, by the way, to a lesser degree.
And it's probably that lesser degree is just for show, but it's like, Jerry, I forgot his last name again, whatever. The guy was talking about in the interview I watched, he said specifically that Psalm 20, it's 22 in our 23. Bible, but 20, well, it's 20. He's talking about 23 in the King James Version, but it's like in ours, it's different. So it's 22, but it's the one that we read before in the pre-communion prayers. The Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want. The place of green pasture, there he made me to dwell. That one, right?
Yes.
That's a particular one that they are very that they hate. Yeah, and they it is true that a lot of these people either don't have religious backgrounds at all or they don't believe themselves. The one guy that I know, that my client right now, I don't know what he necessarily believes in, but he's with people that are like special needs, though, it's like they really just are, they just go off of whatever their family believed. They don't necessarily form their own opinions about that sort of stuff. And I've got a feeling I feel certain to say that his mom probably wasn't particularly religious. But I don't know but the other people, though, because I had other like you did. I had a close friend that was also schizophrenic in college, and he was very anti-religious. It was anti-Christianity, I would say, his orientation. Even the music he would listen to. He used to listen to very anarcho, anti-religious punk rock, like the band Crass. Danny would know what we're talking about. I'm sure Danny's heard these. Danny, if you're listening, you know who we're talking about. But Crass, Bad Religion, bands like that, that had specifically anti-Christian background.
Yeah. Let's continue. So one patient told me when he attempted to pray to Jesus for help, the voices shouted, "Jesus couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he can save you?" Years later, in another institution, the very same message was heard by another patient while she prayed for help. The voices are consistently anti-religious. If they were mere hallucinations, one would not expect that they would have any reaction to religious material or the Bible one way or another. This is not the case. Their reaction to such material is consistently adverse and volatile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always negative. That's the one thing that that the doctor said in the interview that it's also true. It's like you can't, if these things are supposed to be random, why are they consistently just negative?
Yeah.
Because they are. I've never there's maybe one, they're at best neutral. I can't really think off the top of my head of one time where someone had there's only one time. Yeah. Okay. There's only one time I could think of where someone had a positive delusion, and it was that he basically said something blasphemous, essentially, and that was the positive delusion. The other time was one of my first clients that I worked with back when I was just a tech. She used to say that she used to think she was Bugs Bunny or some cartoon character, which is just kind of silly. And we all would kind of laugh about it. And I think now, really, that was the point of the delusion in some sense, was not necessarily for her to find some pleasure out of it, but that people would laugh at her because of it.
Wow. That's so dark.
Yeah.
And sad. Yeah. There also seems to be a gatekeeper effect. I think you kind of talked about this already, right? Usually the patient's first attempt to cope with their voices was to ignore them. This resulted in the voices getting louder. I counseled I counseled them not to block them, but to watch those thoughts from a distance rather than engaging them. Positive changes began to appear in the patient's mental state once they learned how to do this.
Yeah.
And then he kind of talks about the probabilities of recovery. I'll just read it because it's interesting. The most healthy, functional, and most likely to recover were the group of patients who concluded that the voices did not belong to them. Although they did not know who or what the voices were, they viewed them as mysterious invaders and attempted to disown these dark thoughts. These patients sensed that the mental assaults they experienced originated from elsewhere and that their mind was not attacking itself. They intuitively sensed a distinction between their own thoughts and intentions and those of the voices. 2. The second group suspected the voices did not belong to them, but had a hard time believing it. They experienced their voices as real, but didn't understand what was happening and were confused. As these dark thoughts ominously exerted increasing control, their ability to focus on positive aspects of life seriously eroded. When psychiatry told them their voices were hallucinations and diagnosed them as mentally ill, their fears were inflamed. And I can see how that would be the case, because I guess the explanation for, if you say that, if you tell the patient that these dark thoughts are their own, right, and these thoughts are like extremely dark, there must be some like Freudian kind of answer to this, right? Like everyone is just sick inside, like deep down.
Well, and yeah,
Yeah,
that's what a lot of people end up coming to the conclusion of, is that like, yeah, we just all, that's certainly, that was Freud's answer to a lot of this stuff, that, we just all have like really perverted, demented stuff inside of us, which I guess we have the propensity to be that way because we all are fallen humans.
Yeah.
But it's probably especially for someone that's higher functioning, it's probably, it's not, and this is a wider phenomenon that's I've noticed in the last year. It's not just schizophrenic people, but it's also people with depression, people with bipolar, with anything else. The common party line recently has just been, well, just take the meds, and if the meds aren't working, well, it's then they are working, you just don't realize it. Essentially just to discount the person's experience on it, like you were describing, essentially. At least that's the impression of what I got, that they basically say it's like, oh, this isn't real, this is just, this isn't just real. Because first of all, the message you tell someone when you say what they're experiencing isn't real is either twofold, right?
It's gaslighting.
Either one, you've been tricked, or you're an idiot, or two, you're lying,
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if you've had that experience where someone has come to you and is like, that my doctor thinks I'm lying to them. But I think that's why people have that reaction to their doctors now, because they're trying to tell them like, hey, I'm suffering here. And the doctors don't have any answers for them. It's because they're just saying, well, the meds have to work. And if they're not working, then, they have to be working. And then they just shut them up, because we've reached almost, this is the thing, is like things are hitting a critical mass right now with the medical industry and with this. Things are at the head. Especially, I mean, if RFK comes in and really does the things that he promises he's going to do, it's like people are going to be made painfully aware of what the actual effects of things are, and like doctors are going to be held accountable for this. And some people see that. I think a lot of doctors see that. I think a lot of patients are started sensing that, and that's part of the reason why there's like a lot of butting of heads about that. But
and there should be.
There 100% should be. But I think that at this point now it's almost like a cope. I think that's part of the reason why the doctors do that. But what does it do to the patient? What does it do to the person that experiences that? It's devastating.
Yeah. It's devastating.
Absolutely devastating. To try to find out what's wrong with you, and to only get the answer that there's nothing really wrong with you. You've just been tricked. You're just a fool. That's devastating.
Yeah.
And that's what brings people to despair. That's why that's why there's a high suicide rate amongst people that this happens to. And that's where the devil wants you. And that's the greatest trick that's played on these people. And Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Actually, the third group was the least likely to recover. They could not distinguish between their thoughts and those of the voices. They believed all thoughts to be their own. They trusted psychiatry's diagnosis of an incurable mental illness. They accepted that they had a broken brain and their voices were hallucinations. They felt their mind was out of control. They believed the psychotic thoughts were theirs and were much more likely to act upon them. Unfortunately, this debilitating, hopeless, and destructive interpretation was the one psychiatry insisted was the truth. And it leads to exactly what you were just saying. People just off themselves, you know?
Yeah. Or they become vegetables. They become vegetables they either, like, a lot of them will end up in assisted living facilities. A lot of them, sometimes they end up, you know, living quasi-normal lives with family or with something else. But yeah, I mean, it hampers your life when you are on that many medications. It hampers your quality of life. It hampers your ability to make choices and make meaningful decisions in the world and to do meaningful things in the world. And it really affects people, like, negatively at the end of the
Yeah.
day. So
Yeah. People are not getting better.
it
Like
traps you.
this.
Yeah, exactly. It's a prison. You're
Yeah.
put in a prison by when those things, when that's the frame, you part of it is you accept it, but also I think a lot of it is thrusted on people. And when it's thrusted on you and you take it, you essentially, you are like living in hell in a way,
Yeah.
kind of like
Oh,
what was uttered earlier, which read earlier.
yeah. With Elder Thaddeus. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I want to read this because it's really awesome, and I don't think we're gonna get to everything today. We might have to do a part two. But
Well, I'm very much okay with that. So
yeah, me too. This is
yeah,
awesome. Thank you
I
so
know.
much for doing this again.
Thank
Um,
you, Mel. This is what a great honor to be with a great friend of mine, and to talk about something that's impacts all of us. So yeah, thank you,
yeah,
bud.
the honor is mine. Thank you. So this is the fallen angels, and I want to read this because it just really knocks it out of the park, explaining the Orthodox position on this and why the demons are so interested in messing with us, like in our daily lives. Okay, so I'm going to read. Please feel free to interject on anything. And yeah, it's not that
Gotcha.
long, but it's kind of long. But here we go. The evil spirits are fallen angels. God created them along with the other angels. And at first, they were all pure, good, and holy, and generously endowed with many gifts, both natural and given by the grace of God. But some of the angelic spirits became darkened by pride and began to attribute their profusion of various gifts, their excellent qualities, and even the gifts of grace to themselves. They no longer considered themselves created beings. Instead, they began to think of themselves as self sufficient and forgot that they had been made by God. Such was the disastrous cause of their disregard of the sacred obligations to God, their Creator. Among the most eminent angels, there was one whom the holy prophet Ezekiel calls the anointed cherub, and whom all the other sacred authors number among the highest of the angels. He drew his companions toward arrogance and self deception. He himself also sank so deeply into pride that he thought himself to be God's equal and openly revolted against God. He
Mel,
became
can I ask
God.
you one quick thing?
Uh huh.
Does it mention where in Ezekiel that that passage is about the cherub?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ezekiel 28:14.
Oh, okay, 28:14. Okay, all right,
All right.
that's it. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. But that's interesting to me too, because I was talking to my Lives of the Saints students yesterday about, the the Arian heresy, right? I was
Yeah.
trying to explain to these second graders that we don't call the Theotokos the Christotokos because Christ
Yeah.
means anointed one, and there could be any anointed one.
Yes, that's what the
There could be
term.
an
So
anointed.
the Messiah is anointed one. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. It's the same. They're the same. It's where the word comes from, basically. Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, but it's God, and that's why she's the Theotokos, and it's
exactly. That's
such a
why
big
in
idea.
Isaiah, he says, he shall be called Emmanuel. which is God with
God
us.
with us, yeah.
That's where that chant when we sing before Christmas, and the one that we sing in the canon during Clean Week, God is with us. That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So this anointed cherub, he became God's adversary and his desperate enemy. He and the other spirits who rejected obedience to God were cast down from heaven. They drag out their existence on earth, fill the space between heaven and earth, this is very important, and are therefore called the spirits of the air, or the spirits dwelling in the air, and have also descended into hell, down into the earth. All this is attested to by Holy Scripture. The apostle calls the highest spirits who fell principalities and powers. The fallen cherub is the chief and the prince of the kingdom of darkness, consisting of fallen angels. He is the beginning, the source, and the fullness of evil. He is the superior to all the other fallen angels in his abilities, and superior to them all in evil. It is natural that the spirits that were urged on by him and of their own accord subjected their wills to him must still borrow evil from him and hence be subservient to him. And while God left it to the volition of the fallen angels to persist in the evil that is beloved by them, he, through his absolute might and wisdom, infinitely superior to the intelligence of the most intelligent creatures, still remains the highest and most powerful Lord of them all. They continue to exist within the confines of God's will. They are held in these confines as in chains and can do only that which God lets them. Instead of the fallen angels, God created, okay, so here he's talking about us. God created new intelligent creatures, men. He put them in paradise, which was placed in the lowest heaven that was governed previously by the fallen cherub. Paradise was now under the dominion of the new creature, man. It is quite understandable that the new creature thereupon became the object of envy and hatred on the part of the fallen angel and his fallen companions. Led by their leader, the rejected spirits made the attempt to subvert the newly created human creatures and to make them their partners in the fall. The fallen angels sought to make humans share their fallen attitude toward God and to taint them with the poison of their own enmity toward God. They succeeded in their purpose. Although man sinned because he was beguiled and deceived, he still, of his own volition, rejected obedience to God. Of his own volition, he consented to the demons' protests against God. Of his own volition, he entered into communication with the fallen spirits and began to obey them. He fell away from God and from the throng of the Holy Spirits to whom he belonged by the nature not only of his soul, but also of his spiritual body. After the fall, his soul became like that of the fallen spirits, while his body became like that of some unreasoning animal. This crime committed by the fallen angels toward men ultimately decided the fate of the fallen angels. God's grace completely left them, and they became confirmed in their fall. They, being spirits, were now destined to persist in thoughts and feelings exclusively bodily and material. Being spirits, they were unable to rise from the earth. Being spirits, they were unable to rise to anything spiritual. I think that's very interesting. Thus, the fathers of the church explain the verdict uttered by God over the fallen angel after this angel had brought eternal death upon the newly created man. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I have a really funny conspiracy theory about all the stuff they spray in the skies. And now there's some weird fog.
I want to hear that. I want to hear that.
I mean, I think we're just feeding the aerial demons. It's kind of stupid, but who knows, man? Who knows?
We're giving them a snack.
Yeah.
Yo, do you remember? You remember a while ago? This is a minute ago. You sent me something. You sent me a screenshot of something. Someone said that they made chemtrails illegal in New Hampshire.
Yes.
Right. So that's where I live, and I was when you sent that, I was so hyped up. I was like, let's freaking go. It's I'm not done. And I was like, I didn't see any for a day. And so I was like, dude, let's freaking go. And then I saw one the next day and I was like,
oh no. So
but
do you still have them?
Huh?
Do you
Oh
still
yeah, I
have?
see them all the time. I don't
Oh,
think
oh,
the thing is,
really?
I don't think the states might put declarations for that say that they can't, but the problem is like the air after a certain distance, so the air is like probably not technically airspace is like
Not in their
not really the
jurisdiction.
states anymore. It's the federal airspace, and so like there's
Oh,
not really
yeah.
anything you can do about.
Yeah.
No state can really do that. I don't think, unfortunately. So
Dang, that sucks.
it
Yeah,
would
we
be
get it
nice,
every
though.
day.
It would be nice.
Yeah. What the heck is going on, man? See, this is kind of like we're gonna talk about the aerial demons more. I guess maybe in the next time, but it's really weird. It's really weird.
Yeah, the in the air phenomenon is it's very strange. Yeah, and well, you know what? The other thing too about the whole in the air thing, it made me think about this. Did you ever watch Twin Peaks by chance?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So did you watch Firewalk with me?
I don't think I have. No.
No. Did you
I
ever?
hear everyone talking about it.
Right. Did you watch all three seasons or just the original run?
I'm pretty sure I watched all three.
Yeah. Okay. Do you remember the? So they say it explicitly in Firewalk with me, and I think they also kind of insinuated in season three, but like they say at one point when they're in the convenience store, right? The all of the beings, right? So like the little guy and Bob and all those other things, all those other guys, they say we descend from pure air, from thin air. And they also say that we move through electricity basically, and they all look like demons too, and they all act like demons, and it just looks like hell where they are. It's a nasty, disheveled, so it's a pretty awful convenience store, to be honest with you, because they call it convenience. I would never want to go into that convenience store, but pretty awful. So but but they say explicitly we come from the air and we move through the air. And these are like the demons that like mess with people, like Bob and all these other things, you know. So
Hmm.
it made me think about that when you said that. It was like the bell rang in my head. I was like, oh yeah, that's what those things are, Twin Peaks. So
Yeah. Father Seraphim Rose and Father Spirit and Bailey, and there's so much. And at the end of the UFO Deception by Father Spirit and Bailey, the very last chapter,
yeah,
he has so many patristic quotes about the aerial demons. So
oh yeah,
it's really
oh yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So,
and yeah, yeah. No, yeah, it's almost it's so uncanny with the comparison between that and the especially when you dig into the weaves, like interviews that people have about like the interdimensional nature of some of those aliens. It's like, yeah, it's like that's I don't see how you unsee that as being a demon at that point. If you're just like, oh,
yeah,
it's like it moves through dimensions, it's like, well, then that's a demon, dude. Yeah, I've
yeah,
seen. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I don't know how into the weeds you ever got with all the UFO stuff. I used to kind of be into the weeds with that stuff, and
never, never
yeah,
cared that much.
it's yeah. Honestly, you saved yourself a lot of time. I got listen for lack of a better word. Like I said earlier, it's not a coincidence that the UFO stuff is schizo in nature. It's because it makes you kind of schizo just by learning about it. But you
Yeah.
know, they a
Hmm.
lot of people like the common belief amongst like the people that like really go into it is that they're interdimensional. They move through dimensions. That they like their races are not physical, but they live on like third, fourth, fifth dimensions or something like that. And I was like, I remember I read that and I realized like, well, then that's a demon. If
Wow.
that's
Yeah.
the case, that's just a demon. So this whole thing about like, oh yeah, these are like what? No, they're not anything. So, anyways, forgive me for railing off
No,
topic a
we're
little bit,
gonna
but
we're gonna get deep into this. So that's a good teaser for the part two that we're gonna do. I guess I'll just like finish off here. Just finish reading a little bit here, and then we can hop off until next time. So, although man had now joined the number of the fallen angels, his fall was of a totally different character and happened quite differently from the fall of the angels. The angels fell in full realization of what they were doing. They brought about evil within themselves. After they had committed one crime, they obstinately and desperately rushed toward another. Therefore, we completely lost share in the good. They completely lost share in the good. They were quite filled with evil, and evil is now their only quality. Man, on the contrary, fell unconsciously, without premeditation, beguiled and deceived. Thus his natural good was not destroyed, but became mixed with the evil of the fallen angels. But this natural goodness, since it was mixed with evil and poisoned by evil, became useless, insufficient, and unworthy of God, who is the entire and the purest good. Man is most prone to doing evil while he thinks that he is doing good, for he does not see evil when it is covered by the mask of good. Man's reason and his conscience are darkened. The fallen spirits, however, do evil for evil's sake and find a delight and a glory in doing evil. And I don't really, this is such a good chapter. I don't think I need to continue, but
That's such a good
it just
point
goes to show, yeah.
that the author made. That's such a good point, though. It's, there's that old expression, it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and
Yeah.
every single person that has ever committed, if you look at war crimes, I really believe most of the people, I've always believed that most of those people believed they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
If you look at the Japanese that that did all that stuff to the Chinese people in World War II.
Oh yeah.
At the if you look at all the stuff on the Eastern Front, if you look at just anything, those people believed they were doing the right thing, but what they were doing was barbaric.
Yeah.
And that's but that's why what whoever this, I'm not 100% sure if I know who I don't know if you mentioned who the author is of this, but
it is Archimandrite, Panteleimon. It's actually a compilation of writings. So
gotcha. Can you send this to me also when we're done?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks.
Really good. I haven't even finished it, but the couple chapters that I read are just amazing. So
beautiful.
So yeah, it's all about deception, and that's what these UFOs are all. That's the whole meaning of it, is to deceive people, and so that they will look to the skies looking for some kind of sign or miracle of the Antichrist. But that's just I kind of gave it away. But we are Orthodox. We do know this already. So, but we'll get into we'll do a deep dive next time. So
it is a deception. I do just want to say that one thing. It's a deception, and the way that they're linked is because it's a deception away from Christ, right?
Yeah.
When we despair, we move away from Christ in some sense. I don't know if we necessarily do it consciously. I don't think we intentionally do it. I think especially most people do not intentionally do that to move away from Christ, but it is a consequence of despair. And that's what all these voices do. They bring you to despair because it brings you sort of internally dwelling on your doom and gloom and sadness, and that is a movement away from Christ. And and to look up to the stars for your answers away from Christ is also a movement away from Christ. And so they serve the same function in some sense. One is looking towards Antichrist, the other one is just to dwell internally on your own sadness, but they both serve the same function essentially, which is to bring you away.
Yeah,
that's the main connection, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the through line. So yeah, this was an awesome discussion. I think people are really gonna enjoy it. Thank you so much. I can't wait to publish it. And
I really appreciate John Connor. Yeah, I thank you so much, Mel. I really appreciate this, and I'm glad that we got to have this talk today, and I'm glad I got to do it with you as my friend, and that this went so well. And I do just want to say one thing before we depart, though, as a message to the people that will listen, to whoever listens to this, if you have someone like that in your life, or if you encounter someone like that in the world, whether it be someone who's schizophrenic, and even honestly, especially for people that are mentally ill, I think a lot of men have had bad run-ins with women that have mental illness problems and stuff like that. And a lot of the bitterness comes from the bad interactions we've had with those people. And there's definitely a lot of negative that comes from that, but just pray for them and be patient with them, because the affliction that those people go through is, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
Wow. Yeah.
And yeah, I wouldn't. And so pray for those people you see in your life. Pray for those people that you see on the street. Pray for those people that if you see someone in Walmart, if you see someone at the gas station, whatever, pray for those people. Be patient with them. You don't have to go up and be friends with them, even like, and, you know, give them candy, but just remember them when you see them, because that is, God is giving them that trial for their salvation, but it is a hard cross to bear.
Yeah.
It's a very, very, very hard cross to bear.
It's
So
hell.
It is
practically hell.
it is. But, you know, as someone much wiser than me said, it's like we go through that hell here now, so we don't go through that in the world to come. You know, and the people that get through that, the closest I've ever met to an angel are people that are disabled.
Yeah.
You know, the most pure heart I've ever encountered is a disabled person, because God is with those people. Even though they are afflicted, God is also with them in a way that's I can't describe. That's really the closest. I don't know if I'll ever see someone like Saint Seraphim, but I've seen my clients that, you know, God is with them the way that he was with them in some sense, you know?
Yeah. Wow.
So for those who listen, just remember that when you encounter them, pray for them, keep them in your thoughts, keep them in your prayers. Say a Jesus prayer for them. Say the 22nd Psalm for them if you see them.
Yeah.
You don't have to go up and try to smack the demon out of them or anything, but just be kind to them. Please,
yeah, be kind. That goes a long way. Just be kind to people. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's all I got to say about that. So
awesome, John. Thank you so much.
All right,
and talk to you later.
Yes. Merry Christmas to you, buddy. Christ is born.
Christmas. Glorify him.
All
Bye.
Right. Peace.